We are 1 month into the third quarter. We have 2 months left in the year. What are you being asked about more often than not right now? Is it the election still? I know we've got a week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that people focus so much on like if they're the focal point would be the election more so than what's going to happen the rest of the year. I think people too know that their portfolios have done well, for the first 10 months. And so they're not so worried about like, am I necessarily going to make a lot more in the last couple of months of the year as far as maybe getting derailed by an election?
Yeah.
Not so much that I think that's going to happen, but I do think people just think that's such a big catalyst for that it could cause some kind of issues for their portfolio.
Like specifically, if one candidate is elected, their portfolio will go down, and if the other is elected, it will go up.
Unfortunately, yes, and it could work, obviously both ways depending on someone's political view.
It's funny because both candidates, if they follow their proposals, will blow out the budget deficit and add to the debt. And there's no there are cultural differences there, but they're both.
Yes, I actually will say this. I have gotten quite a few, and I think it's because of what's being mentioned during the elections being the deficit issue. I do have quite a few people concerned about it. Again, not necessarily on a short-term view. They're just like on a very large-term view. It is something that does come up.
Have you had anybody that has emailed and said, "Hey, I want to go to cash for the next 2 weeks while the election gets sorted out"?
No, not. I would imagine that won't happen at this point, given that we're only a few days out.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't. I will say 2 elections ago, I had a client that once came into the lobby because she couldn't get a hold of me in the morning. I think I had some meetings, and so she came in and sat in the lobby to meet with me just whenever I was free, and it had some thoughts about the election, wanting to sit, to take some money out. And I was able to talk to her, from a different perspective, and she did fine. It was actually the right thing to do, just to keep her money where, invested. But that's how anxious she was that she, when she couldn't get a hold of me in the morning, she came directly to sit in the lobby to talk to me.
Was this was 4 years ago? Like the last?
I think this was 8 years ago. This was 8 years ago.
8 years ago. Oh, yes. So this was Clinton and Trump.
Correct.
Interesting. Well, I have had someone email and say they're considering going to cash and they want to talk about it. So we'll talk today, but I've only gotten one. I don't know. I'm not too terribly worried. The thing that I'm looking for the most is turning on the television and not having the tidal wave of political ads being dumped on me.
So I will say this, because I don't watch a lot of TV, I'm not inundated with ads. My email boxes have been hit very, very hard. There's times that I've had as many as 5 to 7 emails in a day asking for donations.
Wow.
And I'm like, how did I get on this list? And once in a while I'll get a text message. That's probably once a week. But the emails are ruthless in terms of how many I will get. It's almost like I probably should just donate to someone just to hope that they'll stop emailing me.
No, I think
it doesn't work that way, right? They'll ask for more, but man, it's just like how else do I get off of this list?
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, by the time we do the next one of these, the election, God willing, the election will be over. I don't know if the winner will be crowned, or I guess we don't crown our winners here in this country, but decided upon. I don't know.
Let's most certainly hope that everything's done with by the time we have our next podcast, because it's 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I guess that's something for all of us to look forward to, no matter your political stripe. You ready to dig? We're not even going to talk politics today. We're talking markets, and more importantly, I think we're talking retirement, right? So this is something that's going to affect everybody before the election, after the next election, and the midterm election. So let's dig in and talk about withdrawal rates. What do you say?
All right, let's go.
All right. Okay, welcome back to the Casual Friday Financial Insight Podcast. I got it right this time, which is nice. If you're listening to this and you're a client of ours, welcome back. If you're listening to us or watching us for the first time, whether it's on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I would encourage you to subscribe so that way you don't miss any of these and you get updated regularly every time we drop an episode. We do have guests from time to time with realtors, mortgage brokers, other advisors beyond just Ryan and I here in this office, talking about some different things and the subject matter of the day, answering questions that we get a lot of, like we were just talking about in the intro. If you have questions about kind of what's going on with your portfolio, whether you're a client or not, you can email us at info@forwardfg.com. We'll try and answer your questions or forward your question to the financial advisor here that you're working with so you can hear directly from them. A good way to have us address something on the podcast, right? If you've got a question for us to talk about, maybe take a look at one of the charts. So the way this works, Ryan, we're going to, for people who don't know, we're going to check on the markets real fast, and then we're going to get into our charts. Then we'll talk about kind of what's on our minds at the end. So let's jump right in with what's going on with the markets as we get closer to the election. This is a year-to-date chart showing how the S&P 500 is doing, NASDAQ, Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the aggregate bond index, which is the yellow one here. You got any takeaways here at this late stage in 2024?
I think the major takeaway that most people would kind of think otherwise is that maybe we would have experienced a little bit more volatility. It's seen as though, right before the election, maybe there would have been more volatility with the markets given the uncertainty. And then usually what happens is the market kind of does a little bit better afterwards, just as a sigh of relief that the elections are over. But like right now, we really have not experienced, much volatility since August, September period.
Yeah, I mean, April was ugly on some inflation data. September on that yen carry trade situation, August on the yen carry trade situation. I think it's been interesting because especially you can see here with the ag, and maybe what we'll do is kind of pull in here, if I can get in here, pull in here a little closer. Like here is the 3-month chart. And then even here's just the 1 month, the last month, and yields have gone up and bonds have gone down. So that's really kind of been an interesting story here. I'm trying to get in. It feels like we've also entered kind of a period where bad news is, or good news is bad news, right? We found out today that the economy continues to expand. GDP grew in the third quarter by 2.8%. The ADP job report came out. Private sector employers added 233,000 jobs. Those are good news, but that also suggests that the economy is humming along, and maybe we don't get rate cuts in the way that we thought that we were going to.
So I actually think this relates well to why the ag or the bonds are down over the period of time, especially since the rate cuts, because I think that kind of contradicts what we thought would have happened. Rate cuts happen and we're going to get more rate cuts. Therefore, bonds should do better. And they've done quite the opposite. But I've heard the argument that as the good news has come in, and partially just even the Fed cutting rates, kind of avoiding a recession with all this good news means that people have moved out of their hedge position in bonds. I mean, you think of bonds as your hedge position in terms of if a recession happens, you rather own bonds than stocks. And as a recession maybe is not likely coming, people are taking their hedge off. And so they're moving out of the bonds, and that's what's caused them to go down. It's one explanation of what a reason to why this has been going on.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it just all comes back to interest rates. And if the economy is humming along and inflation, we're still growing and we're adding jobs and the unemployment rate isn't going up, then the Federal Reserve can keep rates higher for longer. And so even in September, markets were pricing in a full % rate cut this year, and it may not happen, may not come true.
Right.
There's less of a likelihood. I think we had reviewed some charts from BlackRock last week. And BlackRock's estimating that we're going to get 0.25% rate cut rather, and they don't know if it's going to be November or December, but it'll be either. In January, markets were predicting 7, and markets were revved up for these rate cuts. I think as we were getting into September, and that we were going to get a lot.
Let's be honest too,
a lot of that's baked in and get baked out, right?
Yeah, we've been all over the place about expectations of rate cuts for the year, right? Because you said January, maybe seven rate cuts, and then as we got a few months into the year, it was turned out to maybe even be 0, right? And then you get back into the point where the chances started to go up again later in the year. Now our expectations after the September cut, not even, a little over a month after that, we're changing our predictions again.
Yeah. Well, the Fed says it's data dependent, and it probably is, which means as we get data, you're making as good of a call as you can make at the time with what the information that you have, right? And if you had asked me in August if the unemployment rate was going to keep going up like it had over the last couple of months, I would have said yes. But the unemployment rate was 4.3% in August. It's 4.1. I mean, we're going to get a jobs report in like 2 days, but the last reading was 4.1%. Yeah, that's trending in a different direction than many people thought even just a couple months ago. So you got to stay on your toes. All of this keeps you on your toes.
The bond market keeps us more on our toes this year, I would say. Or if you relate like the Fed cuts and are related to bonds, I would say that's been keeping us on our toes more so than the stock market has this year.
Yeah. Although we're trading a pretty high multiple. I don't know. We'll dig more into stocks and bonds and things maybe as we finish out the year and we do our 2025 outlook. But it's going to be an interesting. I think rates maybe won't go down as much here in the short term, but we're not done. We got a whole.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, we got a whole way to go in front of us. All right, let's dig into some charts. We got 3 charts today. We're talking about a few different things. Really, we're talking about income in retirement, and this is something that goes beyond the election that's coming up, or the jobs report on Friday, or GDP. Right? It is. You were retired. You're taking income. We've had inflation has been a problem for people who are on fixed incomes, if you want to call it that, whether it's pension, Social Security. And we're just getting word from Social Security that the Social Security cost of living adjustment is 2.5%, which is reflecting lower inflation, right? And it's down certainly from the high 8%, the mid 8s a couple of years ago, and even is down from where it was last year. It's kind of interesting that Social Security income for people who are collecting on Social Security is reflecting that inflation is slowing, but hasn't gone away yet. I mean, 2.5% is a lot lower than the last 3 years. But also in the last 3 years, we were having some of the largest increases since 1981.
Yeah, this is one of those good things, bad things, I'd say. It feels good when you see your Social Security check go up by the amount that it did the last few years. I think people, like that. But on the flip side is what you're actually having to spend your Social Security check on has gone up so much. And that's the reason why your Social Security check's bigger than the prior year, or has jumped so substantially over the last few years, is because the cost of living of everything else has gone up pretty substantially. Yeah. So it's not like you're just making out like a bandit when you see these large jumps.
No. And it affects everybody differently. Like if it's some people, if you're retired and you own your house, your housing costs aren't rising necessarily. Your electricity maybe, but not your housing costs, for example. And that gets reflected in inflation. So maybe you are coming out ahead if your housing costs haven't increased, and that's getting baked into the number. But things like energy costs, healthcare costs, those all go up. So no, I think at best for a lot of people, this is a wash. I don't think anybody's too terribly excited about a 2.5% cost of living adjustment, even though that's probably in line with what inflation actually is over the last year, right?
Yes. I mean, this is a good indication when you see the percentage of how much your Social Security check goes up, or, the cost of living gets changed, gives you an idea of just where inflation has more recently been. Yep. Right. So like that, when it was high, you kind of like, okay, that matches my thoughts and my shopping experiences. Everything was expensive, and it's dictated by that large jump that you had a couple of years ago in the cost of living with your Social Security check. But now, again, it's getting back to more normal-ish levels. And that's because inflation has gone down more recently.
Yep. And frankly, it's pretty well on par. That you can see the gold line here is the consumer price index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. We've had stretches where the CPI went up in the 2010, 11, 12, and there were no cost of living adjustments there. So at least there's no lag here where things are maybe getting more expensive, but there's no COLA here for Social Security. So it's not all bad.
Right.
Well, so Social Security is an important part of retirement, right? Because this is a pension payment of sorts for people. You pay into it, you're getting it back. It matters more and more and more and more as people are starting to live longer, right? So you're not outliving your money, and these cost of living adjustments certainly help. And a 2.5% cost of living adjustment on someone with a higher Social Security payment because they waited until their full retirement age or age 70 to take it is going to have more of an impact than if you took it at 62. So these cost of living adjustment discussions are probably also important if you are deciding when to take your Social Security.
I think obviously for people that have not saved a lot in, for retirement, 401ks, retirement plans. So obviously Social Security becomes the main source, if not the only source for some people. So again, for those people where they don't have money to pull out of, or a lot of money to pull out of an investment account, it is that inflation factor definitely affects them. It could help them or hurt them on the expense side.
Yeah. The other part for retirees who are taking income, right? You got income coming in from Social Security, and then you also have income coming in from your retirement accounts. And historically, the safe rule, or the I guess back of the napkin calculation, so you could take 4% from your portfolio annually and have it be a safe withdrawal rate. And so we're looking at this chart here is showing us what would actually be a safe withdrawal rate for a 60-40 stock to bond index portfolio based on the last 30 years. And it actually shows that the historical safe withdrawal rates based on that 60-40 stock to bond portfolio and inflation rates across 30 years, that the actual maximum with safe withdrawal rate was a fair amount higher than that 4%, right?
I mean, it's a lot higher, right? I mean, the average is 6.9 versus 4. I mean, that's almost, if you were to spend if you were to take 4% of your investments and spend it every year,
right,
versus the person that did 6.9%, which is the average, that's almost a 75% more, in spending that you're allowed to have. Increase. And so it's a substantial amount to be able to take out that much and still have your portfolio intact for your retirement years.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think this is so there are a couple, I don't want to say flaws with this, but it's oversimplified because it doesn't account for differences in portfolio construction, risk tolerance, people who overreact to short-term market pullbacks. If you had pulled back in 2008 or 9 and not gotten back in until 2011, right? Yeah. So there's more going on. But it does show that despite some of the economic challenges over the last few years, that safe withdrawal rate is still pretty strong and maybe even better than what we expect. It also, I think one thing though, is that, there's one year in the 1960s where it was as low as 4%, but there are other years where it's higher. And one thing I find with people taking money from their accounts is they aren't adjusting their withdrawal rates. So in a bad year, let's say they're taking 6, well, they don't dial it back to 5 in a bad investing year because they need that dollar amount to hit. And so in some years they're taking a higher percentage, some people taking a lower percentage. They don't want to vary what the percentage is that they take out.
Yeah. So my experience over the last, say, almost, 20 plus years of clients taking withdrawals when they hit retirement. These are for mostly the clients, not the required minimum distribution amount that they're forced to take. This is for the client that is taking it out to use for monthly expenses. I have noticed that I've had to put a percentage, maybe 80, 90+% of my clients that choose an amount when they start retirement, 10 years goes by, 12 years, 14 years, 15 years go by, and they're still taking the same flat dollar amount. They're not taking a percentage. And so they're not varying it. So they're not, if their accounts went up, they're not taking, 4% of a higher account value is they're allowed to take out more. They're not.
Yeah.
They tend to kind of just maintain off of the dollar amount that they've done. And even during these tougher years since COVID, where inflation has definitely impacted people in terms of what their expenses are, I have not had clients call in saying, you know what, that $2,000 a month is not sufficient anymore. I need $2,500 a month. Surprisingly, people are kind of really stay within I think those means of what comes out of their account.
Yeah, I think where the real impact comes is in a year like 2022, where a 60-40 portfolio is getting buried because the stocks are down, the bonds are getting hammered. You've got inflation. People's accounts, their investment accounts, are losing money, and they're still taking out that same dollar amount.
Sure.
And so you're maybe down 12% on your investment value, but you've also taken out what is now effectively 8% instead of 5 or 6 or 4 or whatever the number is. And a couple of years later,
you're compounding the problem
at that high level mark, but that's because they were withdrawing a lot of money as the account was falling, and that's hard to recover from.
Correct.
That would mean sometimes you do need to kind of adjust your withdrawal rate in really bad years.
Yes.
So some interesting food for thought that the 4% rule doesn't always hold true. I think markets, if you stick with your investments, they return really well. And that's why that historical maximum withdrawal rate can be pretty good. I don't know.
It still remains a good rule of thumb. I think that there was a point in time, where that 40% in the portfolio, the 40% being bonds, people were questioning whether the returns were going to be high enough, right?
Sure.
Because that 40% wasn't doing a whole lot, and therefore, does the 4% rule still hold weight, or was it going to have to be lowered because the returns weren't going to be as high? And now it seems like, again, it's still a very good rule of thumb. Bonds are yields are as good as they have been in most recent memory. So they're producing returns that clients need in a 60-40 portfolio.
Right. I think the other reason why one would stay with a 4% withdrawal rate and not crank it up to 5 or 6 or 6.9 is because we are all living longer. And this is this is always the great unknown when you're retirement planning, whether you're taking money out for, or you're applying for your Social Security benefits, or using the simple rule of thumb like the 4% rule. They just don't account for increasing life expectancies. So according to the Social Security Administration, 40-year-old men and women today, we're both a little bit older than that, but 40-year-old men and women today have life expectancy of 79 and 83 respectively, which is kind of what we're seeing here on the chart. But the 90th percentile could live well into their 90s. And similarly, men and women who are 65 years old today could live to 83 and 86 on average, while the 90th percentile could go to 94 and 97. So, the difference of a decade or longer, which is a retirement of 20 years versus 30 years, can have a huge impact on a portfolio and financial plans. And as people live longer and healthier lives, this is something that we probably need to take into account more and more, which would cause you to be a little bit more conservative, maybe on your withdrawal rates, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to control this, is to be more conservative. If you think about you're maybe working 40 years ish, and now all of a sudden you may live to retire for 30 years. It's a lot of money that you have to save, and one way to maybe make the money last is, like you said, don't be conservative in the amount that you take out and live on. Obviously, the other one, which not a lot of people love to hear, is you work longer.
Delay retirement. Yes.
If you're gonna retire at 65, you live to 95. That's 30 years. But if you retire at 70 and live to 95, now you got 25 years to cover. It kind of releases the amount of pressure that you're going to have on the portfolio by shorting. Again, it's a way of saving more. If you're going to work longer, you're probably going to continue to save longer too. Put more money into the portfolio, and then again, you have less years to cover during retirement.
Well, I think people have anchored like the age 65 in their heads, or maybe it's 67, right? Because 65 is a Medicare age. 67 for a lot of people now, if you haven't collected Social Security benefits, 67 is going to be your full retirement age. But it's almost like you have to remind people, like, have you done, or, we do the math and tell them if they've done what they needed to do to spend a third of their life retired.
Right.
You spend the first third of your life, or at least quarter of your life, going to school, bumping around, not making much money. And then you spend a third, or maybe a little bit more than a third, working, saving, raising families, etc. And then a third of your life in retirement. That's a long time. That's a long time. That requires a ton of savings, a ton of financial management, personal financial management, whether you're saving and not spending, investing, those kinds of things. That's a long time to be retired, Ryan.
No, it definitely is a long time to be retired and worry about things. I think that is the worry about retirement is, am I going to have enough money? Right.
Always. That's a question. I mean, this is the threshold question for clients to their financial advisors.
Yeah.
Can I retire? Am I going to run out of money, etc.?
Yeah. And maybe there's two things involved in, am I going to run out of money? One is, the amount of money that I need to spend, to live my life. Am I going to have enough, or am I going to outspend it? Right. And then you kind of throw in the market in there. You definitely have people that are in retirement. They're doing fine. But then, of course, if they're thinking, what happens if the market goes down substantially? Am I going to have enough money to continue to live my life? And so that one comes up every now and then, obviously dependent on the market conditions, and the people's mentality of how that's going to affect them.
Well, we've unlocked a new fear in the last 2 years also. Before they were saying, what is the market doing? But, hey, this year, all of your prices went up 10%. Your eggs or a bag of groceries is $100 now instead of $50.
Well,
right?
Yeah, inflation was literally something we never even needed to, no client brought that up for 2 decades.
We baked it into financial plans. We were taking averages, right? So that a 30-year average was something like 3%, but we weren't baking in inflation spikes. And over time, it's all going to come out in the wash where the historical average will still be 3%. But when you're living it, it's a different story. That's tough. I don't know. These are the real questions. When we ask, what's the market going to do the day after the election? I don't know. You don't know. We don't know. What's the Federal Reserve going to do at their meeting on December 18th? I don't know. You don't know. They don't know. They don't even know. But these are the things you can hold on to. Right? This is, we look through, okay, you can rely on Social Security. You're likely going to get cost of living adjustments, right? What is a safe withdrawal rate? How do we bake this into a financial plan to make sure that you can reasonably rely on the amount of money you're taking out, that you're not going to blow out your portfolio? And then finally, how is your health? How much, I don't know about you. I run my financial plans out to 95.
Okay. I run mine out to 9. I do run mine out to 90.
You run them out to 90.
Yeah.
And before we would run them out to 85.
Right.
Right. And so as time has gone on, even just in our careers of a couple of decades, those numbers keep having to go out. And it's not because necessarily someone's going to live to 95 in the case where I'm running a plan, but you need to know, are you going to run out of money if you do?
Correct.
That's the question. So kind of some interesting stuff. If you're watching this and we haven't run a plan for you, or you're listening to this and you haven't had a financial plan run for you, it's a little bit of homework. We need some information, right? We need things like your account statements, pension information, Social Security information, but we really do put together cash flow analysis for your retirement where we say, okay, here's what your expenses are. We're going to inflate them a little bit. Here's what your investments are going to do. We're going to run some analyses to see what's a reasonable rate of return. And we figure these things out within reason, knowing that we don't have a crystal ball. So I'll just give us a plug. If you haven't done this, info@forwardfg.com, right? It's probably time, especially in your 50s, late 50s, early 60s, retirements within 10 years, maybe. That's a great time to I won't say start planning, but start getting serious.
Yeah, I think if you're definitely to the 10-year mark, there's enough time that if there's some deficiencies in the retirement plan, there's time to hopefully still make changes, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing the retirement plan 1 year out from when you're retiring and there's some glaring holes, it is the numbers are going to be really, really shocking when you see them to make the retirement work usually. And so having some time makes a world of a difference that you can actually.
Have you done plans, Ryan, where like you're sitting across the table from somebody and you look at it, you got to look them dead in the eye and be like, you're going to run out of money in your late 70s. You got to keep working.
I do. And it's uncomfortable. They're the worst. I mean, I don't like delivering bad news, but you have to. Right?
Absolutely. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, not to use a cliche, but these people appreciate that you're shooting them straight versus delivering just some good news, which could be catastrophic if they're relying on good news when that news is actually bad.
Right. You're doing disservice if you're not going to tell them the actual facts.
Yeah,
even though the facts could be uncomfortable.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, you tell people if you keep doing what you're doing, your kids are going to inherit a ton of money, and they still don't believe you, right?
Yeah.
The picture is too rosy, and you can't they're like, well, what if I'm in memory care for a decade and a half? You're like, well, that doesn't usually happen, but we can plan that out, I suppose. I don't know. Interesting analysis. I think this is much more useful oftentimes, even than I know we go through and we're like, hey, what's the market doing today or not? That stuff matters. And it's certainly fun even for some of us to track, but the real retirement planning crunching comes down to like Social Security income, pension income, savings, withdrawal rates, longevity, expenses, inflation. That's the bread and butter. Those are the meat and potatoes of really being able to retire confidently, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, I think that was a pretty good discussion, actually. I don't know if everybody's still listening because it's kind of in the weeds for our field, but I think it's a worthwhile talk to have. What's on your mind these days?
Well, I'm going to ask you for some help, but I think I mentioned last episode going to New York, so that's happening this Friday. You kind of lay out the plans for the trip, and then you get as I'm now 2 days out, like you get to the nitty gritty packing. What do you do on the plane? And so what do I do on the plane is what I'm going to ask you, because I need some recommendations. I mentioned I don't watch a lot of TV, so it's not like I could just download a bunch of the next Netflix episodes that are in line and watch them. I hate really relying on the movie selection of what's on the airplane, assuming that you even have a television in front of you, just because it's limited. Sometimes it's a lot of the same movies I may have watched on a previous trip. So if I need to download a show or a movie, the caveat to the show is like it's not like 5 seasons long, because I won't be able to finish that on a trip back from New York. Do you have any recommendations for me?
Yeah, so I'm going to rehash a couple that I've made already.
Okay.
One is so I'll give you some that I have watched and haven't watched. I can't believe I'm recommending something I haven't seen. The Gentleman on Netflix. It's like an English gangster show. I want to say 8 episodes. Guy Ritchie made it, who's made some other good movies. Like, it's spectacular.
Okay.
It's spectacular.
It's a period piece? Like, it takes...
No, it's like today.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of, I don't know, fanciful gangsters doing gangster stuff, but it's funny. It's really funny. It's great. It's a great watch. It's so good.
Okay.
So The Gentleman, you can download, watch that. I think it's Amazon Prime has Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Oh, the TV show that's after the movie that came after.
Yeah, it really has nothing to do with the movie.
Okay.
It's just a different take on the same concept.
Okay.
Very good. I think Donald Glover, he was in Community and Atlanta. He's talented like crazy. So those are things I've even recommended on this. Do we call it a show? On this show already. It's great.
Okay.
If I were getting on a plane and downloading something, there are a couple movies that look funny. Apple TV Plus has like kind of lighter stuff. So there's a Brad Pitt, George Clooney movie called Wolves that seems interesting. That might be worthwhile, that you can probably watch with your kids sitting in the airplane seat next to you. Because I know that's a thing. That's
definitely an issue unless I'm sitting next to my wife only, or I am the one that usually has to go sit by myself. If there's, it's like
me too.
Me too.
Thank
there's
God
not
for our
4
wives.
seats together. It's therefore I'm sitting in some other part of the plane by myself.
Yeah, you do 3 in 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, well, I'll write those down. It's good to have some recommendations because I hate going to the internet trying to find recommendations based upon some random person that you don't know because their tastes are completely you don't know their tastes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And sometimes I use it as an opportunity to kind of dig deep on work stuff. So I'll download research reports and trade logs and do some of that.
It's
Kind
nice
of
to mix
stuff.
it up if you have a long flight, not to just all watch TV for the entire flight. So you're right. It is nice to.
Yeah. I'll read a little bit, watch a podcast. I'm listening to so I mentioned this last time. I bought a book and then realized that it was part of my you're not subscribed to Spotify, right?
No.
Okay, never mind then. I was gonna say I'm listening to something called
That's a whole nother discussion. So the issue of subscriptions for me.
you got to take your hand off your wallet and get a subscription to Spotify. Jesus. There's a book called In This Economy: How Money and Markets Really Work by Kyla I think it's Scanlon. I'm not sure. She's actually a TikTok finance person, but she used to write, I want to say it was for like Forbes or the Journal of Barron's or somebody like that. She's young, but it's an interesting, the forewords by Morgan Housel, who has written some very good personal finance books.
Morgan's very good.
Yeah. And so don't discount her just because she's on TikTok. It's really distilling and putting in plain terms, like stuff that goes on in the economy. A lot of it I've known already, but I found it interesting. So that would be another kind of easy read. Josh Brown's also got a book that I've started that's pretty good so far, but I'm just barely into it. So those would be some recommendations on reading or listening to audiobooks.
Those are plenty of recommendations to get me through the trip.
Yeah.
So that's good. Thank you.
Well, good. Well, I don't know how much I've got on my mind. I think last time we did this, we were headed over to our client wine tasting event, which I thought was pretty successful. So one of the things on my mind is giving a big shout out to Joe Perry. If you watch or listen to this, you've seen him on here. He's our mortgage ninja. The dude has crazy stories. He was even teasing some stories for some mortgage kind of war stories that he's going to give at the next FPA meeting, which is the Financial Planning Association. He helped us select the wines. He was there talking with our clients. He's always an awesome resource. And so big shout out to Joe Perry for being at our client wine tasting event. We love having him there every year. The only other thing is, dude, I'm in the process right now. It's been a 2-day process. I'm not doing it myself, but we are cutting down a tree at our house that is more than 100 years old.
And how big is it?
Huge. The thing's huge, and it's dying, and it sucks. It feels like a sin is being committed chopping down a tree that's more than 100 years old. But
so sometimes people, you either cut down a tree sometimes because it's dying, or you cut it down because you aesthetically are doing something different, right?
Yeah,
it's dying, right? So you're doing what kind of has to be done, not because you're doing something that you want to do, just to and killing the tree because you want to do something else with that area or that space. It's a much different thing. It doesn't make it mean like it makes you feel like a ton better, but again,
no, in your head, you're like, this needs to happen. In your heart, you're like, this is a real bummer. And it's huge. Like this was the defining feature of our front yard was this massive 100-year-old tree. And as it's coming down, the house looks naked.
Our neighbors had like 4 trees, pretty, good sized trees in front of their house, like lined right in front, between the street and them. And they took them down. You're like, wow, it looks really bare without those trees. But was your tree was it near the house or potentially?
Yeah, it was close. I'm surprised the insurance allowed us to even keep it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So another good reason though, it's one less worry on a windy day
the thing it's the circumference, it's huge. Like thing is huge. It's dying from the top. So the worry was really more that branches were going to fall off and not destroy, but damage the roof or part of the side of the house. And it was dying from the top. So, we could trim it down 10 feet and then come back the next year and still need to take it out. And so, why pay twice as much when you can just kind of do the thing the first? Anyway, I know people don't tune in to hear about my gardening misadventures or whatever's going on with the tree, but it's stressing everybody out in our house. Henry's like super into nature and he doesn't even want to look out his bedroom window because his big old tree isn't there anymore. Anyway, so that's what's on our mind. All right, let's leave it there. When we cut another one of these, you'll tell us how New York went. You'll tell us how fast Linda ran in the New York Marathon.
For sure. Hopefully we'll have some good stories I'll have some good stories to bring with me.
Talking more about that will give us more time to avoid talking election results, God willing, but it's probably something that we'll need to cover because
by the time we do this, 2 weeks from today, the elections will be a week over. It'll be the thing of the past. No one's going to want to hear us.
God willing, we'll all just know. Yeah, we'll be able to
we'll just move on. We'll skip it and move on.
We'll leave it with this. No matter who wins on November 5th, we're all going to wake up November 6th, and there's still going to be a line at Starbucks. There's still going to be Costco will still be busy that Saturday. The economic world is going to continue to turn. The economic cycle is much bigger than one person, even if they're the leader of the free world. So no matter what side of the aisle you're on, just remember this: investors and markets are not red. They are not blue. They are green. They're rank capitalists. Just give us the information. We'll trade accordingly. And we're going to make some money on it, God willing. So don't get caught up in this. It matters to us as citizens, but much less to us as investors. Keep that in mind.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Let's leave it there. If you have questions or you have something that you want us to cover on this podcast, shoot us an email, info@forwardfg.com. Ryan, have a safe trip. Good luck with the movie and book recommendations. We'll catch you when you're back.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.